My name is Anthony. I am 84 years old, and honestly, just a year ago, I felt like my life was slipping through my hands, but not physically, mentally. It all started slowly, like those little things one doesn't want to accept. At first, it was simple details, not remembering where I left the keys, forgetting why I entered a room, or having to think twice to recall the name of a lifelong neighbor. At first, I laughed at myself. I said it was just part of aging, something that happens to everyone. But as months passed, it really started to affect me. I forgot important appointments, repeated the same stories over and over without realizing it. And worst of all, I would go blank in the middle of a conversation. It felt like my mind was full of fog, like the words and memories were there, but I could no longer reach them. Seeing the worry in my family's eyes was what hurt the most. My daughter began to ask me more often, "Dad, are you okay? Have you had a checkup?" And inside, I knew I wasn't okay. There came a time when I thought this was the beginning of something worse, that I was entering a stage of decline with no turning back. But just when I felt most desperate, something happened that changed everything. A casual conversation with an old friend, a piece of advice that seemed simple, and a fruit. A fruit I never imagined could have so much power. One I started eating every morning, and little by little, day by day, began to restore something I thought I was losing forever: my memory. Today, I want to tell you exactly what happened, what fruit it is, how I consume it, how long it took to notice changes, and why science is beginning to confirm what I experienced firsthand. Because I know that maybe you or someone you love is going through the same thing. And if my story can help you, it will have been worth sharing. Before we begin, I want to know something about you. Tell me in the comments, how old are you? And from where are you watching me? The beginning of the problem, my declining memory. It all started so subtly that, to be honest, at first I didn't even pay much attention. I have always been an organized person, the type who writes things down on a calendar, remembers birthdays, anniversaries, and even small details from conversations. But one day, for no reason I could explain, I forgot my granddaughter's birthday. I remember they called me in the afternoon to invite me to her small party, and I went blank. I had no idea what day it was. I felt terrible. I tried to hide it, make an excuse, but inside, shame was eating me up. A few weeks later, I started noticing I was telling the same stories over and over. It happened especially during family gatherings. I'd talk to my children about something I thought I had never told them, and they would interrupt me with an awkward smile. "Yes, Dad. You told us that last week." At that moment, I laughed, tried to make a joke, but inside, frustration hit me hard. I didn't understand why my mind was playing such tricks on me. Then came the small losses of objects. Things that always had their place. Car keys, my glasses, wallet. I'd spend minutes, sometimes hours, searching all over the house. I once left the keys inside the fridge, and only found them when I went to get the milk. One afternoon, after looking for my glasses for over half an hour, I sat in the living room and felt something very strange, a mix of fear and sadness. I stared into space, wondering if this was just a temporary lapse or the start of something more serious. Nights became moments of reflection and worry. I asked myself, am I starting to lose my mind? Is this the beginning of a disease that has no turning back? I remember one morning especially. I got up early to go for a walk as usual, but when I opened the front door, I stood there, not knowing where to go. I stayed there several minutes, as if the usual path was now unknown. That was the first time I felt true panic. From that day on, every forgetfulness, every confusion, every word I couldn't find became an alarm signal. I started doubting myself. Sometimes I avoided talking much for fear of saying something wrong. I even stopped reading the newspaper aloud as I used to, because I was embarrassed to make mistakes. Then came a moment I will never forget. The afternoon my daughter looked me in the eyes with that mix of worry and affection and said, "Dad, I think we should go to the doctor." I felt a knot in my stomach. I knew she was right. But admitting I had a problem was one of the hardest steps I've ever taken. The impact on my daily life and family. Months went by, and the forgetfulness stopped being occasional. It became part of my routine, and little by little, my family noticed it more than I did. My daughter was the first to say something out loud. I remember that day perfectly. We were at her house having coffee in the kitchen. She asked if I could pick up my grandchildren from school that afternoon, and I confidently said yes. But then, I completely forgot. Hours later, she called me worried. Her voice was a mix of anger and distress. "Dad, where are you? Did you go for the kids?" It was like a bucket of cold water had been dumped on me. I apologized 1,000 times, but the damage was done. That day was the first time I saw true worry in her eyes. It wasn't just a silly forgetfulness. It was a neglect that affected her children. After that, she started calling me more often. "Dad, have you eaten today? Did you take your pills? Did you go for your usual walk?" At first, it annoyed me. I felt like she was treating me like a child. But over time, I understood it was her way of caring for me, not telling me directly that I was becoming forgetful. My grandchildren, for their part, started asking questions they hadn't before. "Grandpa, why do you always forget what we tell you? Why don't you remember the games we played last week?" Their words were innocent, but they hurt like knives. One afternoon, while playing cards, my youngest grandson looked at me and said, "Grandpa, are you getting old in the head?" I felt a lump in my throat. I laughed to keep from crying. But that night, when I was home alone, I cried. I cried like I hadn't in years. That was when my daughter insisted on taking me to the doctor. "Just to be sure, Dad, for peace of mind." The first visit was more uncomfortable than I imagined. The doctor asked simple questions, but I struggled to answer. He asked me to remember a list of words, and after 5 minutes I could barely repeat half. Then he asked me to draw a clock, something I thought would be easy. But when placing the hands, I realized I had completely lost the sense of the position of the numbers. I left that appointment with a heavy heart. There was no firm diagnosis yet. But the doctor's words echoed in my mind for days. "It could be mild cognitive impairment, but we need more tests." That phrase stayed in my head like an echo. Since then, concern at home increased. My daughter started accompanying me more places. My son-in-law, who had always been distant, started calling more often. Even my neighbors began offering help, taking me shopping, accompanying me to the park, or just stopping by to say hello. And although deep down I appreciated their kindness, every act of help was also a reminder of what I was losing. The feeling of no longer being myself grew stronger and stronger. The fear of Alzheimer's, the conversation with the neurologist. I remember perfectly the morning I sat in the neurologist's office. The waiting room was full of elderly people, some accompanied by their children, others sitting silently, looking down, like me. My daughter had insisted so much on this appointment that in the end, I agreed. But deep inside, I was terribly scared. The fear you carry inside, that you don't confess, but that slowly eats away at you. When the doctor called me, my hands trembled. I sat in front of him and for a few minutes told him everything. The forgetfulness, the repetitions, the confusion of recent weeks. While I spoke, he took notes, nodded silently, and occasionally asked specific questions. "Anthony, do you know what day it is today?" It was a bit hard, but I managed to say it. "Can you tell me who the country's president is?" That I also knew. But then he asked me to repeat a list of words, and I failed. After a series of small memory and attention tests, the doctor put down his pen, looked at me with a mix of professionalism and empathy, and said something I will never forget. "Anthony, for now, we cannot talk about Alzheimer's or dementia, but we are seeing signs of what we call mild cognitive impairment." That phrase hit me like a punch in the chest. I was silent, I didn't know whether to breathe a sigh of relief or be even more scared. "Does that mean I will end up losing my memory completely?" I asked with a trembling voice. The doctor took a deep breath before answering. "Not necessarily. Some people with mild cognitive impairment stabilize their memory over time. Others may improve. But it's also true that in some cases, this can be a precursor to more serious dementia, like Alzheimer's." At that moment, I felt the ground disappear beneath my feet. My daughter grabbed my hand. I glanced at her and saw in her face the same mix of fear and hope. The doctor continued, explaining that memory at my age can be affected by many things: stress, lack of sleep, poor diet, even depression. He gave me some general recommendations. "Anthony, from now on, it's important that you take care of 3 fundamental things. First, diet. He talked about a diet rich in fruits, vegetables, fish, and nuts. Less sugar, fewer processed foods. Second, physical activity. No need to run marathons, but walking every day, moving the body, keeping circulation active. And third, mental stimulation. He recommended reading, doing crosswords, learning new things, keeping the mind busy. Think of your brain like a muscle. If you don't use it, it atrophies." Before leaving the office, he gave me a couple of brochures about brain health, but what stuck most was his last phrase, as he had his hand on the door handle. "Anthony, you still have time to make changes. Not all is lost." I left that appointment with mixed feelings. Part of me was relieved not to have a dementia diagnosis yet, but another part couldn't stop thinking, how much time do I have before this gets worse? That afternoon, back home, I opened the drawer where I kept pictures of my grandchildren and promised myself I would do everything possible to keep remembering their faces and names as long as possible. The search for natural solutions. After that visit to the neurologist, something inside me changed. On one hand, I felt fear, but on the other, a kind of determination I hadn't felt in years was born. I couldn't just sit idly by waiting for my memory to keep worsening. If there was something I could do, anything, I was going to try. So I started what I call my desperate search phase. I began asking everyone I knew, neighborhood friends, parish colleagues, even younger neighbors. A friend told me, "Anthony, start taking more B vitamins. They're great for memory." Another recommended the famous omega-3. Bluefish, Anthony, every day, sardines, salmon, that will wake up your brain. Even my granddaughter brought me a couple of supplements she had seen online, capsules promising elephant memory in 2 weeks. The box was nice, but when I read the label, I didn't understand half the ingredients. I also started reading. My daughter lent me a couple of books on brain health. One talked about the Mediterranean diet, another about mental exercises, and another even said meditation helped memory. I, who had never been very tech-savvy, started watching videos on YouTube. Some talked about memory exercises, others about home remedies. Every day, I wrote down advice in a notebook. Drink more water, sleep better, take ginkgo biloba. But no matter what I tried, honestly, I didn't feel much improvement. I still forgot where I put the keys, still repeated stories at family meals, and worst of all, still forgot names of people I had known all my life. One afternoon, while having coffee in the park, I met Mr. Manuel, a lifelong neighbor, 88 years old, with enviable memory. I told him what was happening to me. He listened carefully, and then, in that slow voice he's always had, said, "Anthony, do you eat blueberries?" I looked at him surprised. "Blueberries? Those little blue balls?" He nodded. "I've been taking them every morning for years, and I don't know if it's because of that. But look, at my age, I still remember everything." That very night, I went home and started researching. I searched online, benefits of blueberries for memory. And that's how it all began. I found articles about scientific studies, antioxidants, something called anthocyanins, words I hadn't known before but now found fascinating. I discovered that this fruit, small but powerful, had been the subject of research at major universities. They said it could help improve memory, protect the brain from aging, and even enhance learning in older adults. I felt a mix of hope and curiosity. Could it be true? Could something as simple as a fruit help me with this problem that worried me so much? The next morning, I made a decision. I was going to try it. But of course, I wasn't going to do it halfway. If I was going to add something new to my routine, I wanted to do it right. I wanted to know how much, and for how long I should consume it to really notice a change. And so began the next stage of my story, the stage where I discovered the power of blueberries and how something so small ended up having such a big impact on my life. The miracle fruit, what fruit it is and why I decided to try it. After that conversation with Mr. Manuel and all the research I did on my own, I came to a conclusion that seemed almost unbelievable, but made more and more sense. The fruit everyone was talking about, the one that appeared again and again in articles, videos, and even some medical studies, was blueberries. Yes, blueberries. Those little dark blue balls I had seen all my life in the supermarket but had honestly almost never bought. Why? Because I always thought they were one of those exotic fruits only young and modern people ate in yogurts or expensive desserts. I never imagined they could have so much power over something as delicate as memory. But the more I read, the more I understood why. Blueberries are full of something scientists call anthocyanins and polyphenols. Difficult words, but they mean simple things. Anthocyanins are the natural pigments that give them their characteristic dark blue color. But it's not just about color. It turns out these compounds have a very powerful antioxidant effect. And simply put, antioxidants are like a shield for the cells in our body, including those in the brain. They help fight what doctors call oxidative stress, which is one of the main culprits of cognitive decline with age. Also, according to several studies I found, blueberries seem to improve communication between neurons, promote blood flow to the brain, and even help regenerate brain connections. There was a study from Harvard University, another from the University of Cincinnati, all reaching the same conclusion. Including blueberries in the diet could improve memory in older adults. So after reading all that, I had no more doubts. The next day, I went straight to the market. I remember that moment perfectly. I went to the fruit section, looked at the trays of blueberries, and for the first time in my life, instead of walking past, I took two, one to start, and another just in case. When I got home, I didn't know exactly how much to eat, but I looked for information again. Most experts recommended a daily portion, something like half a cup, or what fits in the palm of your hand. So that's what I did. Every morning after my coffee, I served myself a small portion of blueberries. At first, I ate them plain. Gradually, I started adding them to my yogurt, oatmeal, or just eating them while reading the newspaper. And I won't lie to you. At first, they tasted a little sour. I wasn't used to their flavor. But over the days, I began to enjoy them. That mix of sweetness and freshness, now it tastes delicious to me. I even invented my own routine. I served the blueberries, sat by the window, and while eating them, I did a little memory exercise, trying to remember my grandchildren's names, my daughter's phone number, or a poem from my youth. What was important to me was consistency. Day after day, no excuses. And what happened next, I'll tell you in the next part. But I'll give you a hint. It was much more surprising than I expected. My first weeks consuming it, subtle but noticeable changes. The first days, to be honest, I didn't notice much. I ate my small portion of blueberries every morning, sat in my usual chair, and thought, well, at least this is healthy. But after the first week, I started to notice something. Something small, almost imperceptible, but it was there. One morning, for example, while getting dressed, I realized that for the first time in months, I didn't have to open the drawer and check the medication list to remember which pill I needed that day. I simply remembered. It wasn't a coincidence. The next day, the same thing. Then, a few days later, something happened that surprised me even more. My grandson Louis came to visit me. He had recently started a new job. Without much thought, I asked him, "How is your new position at the bank, son?" Louis looked at me and said, "Grandpa, you remember that? I thought you'd already forgotten." And then I knew. Something was changing. I also noticed that when reading the newspaper, I could concentrate longer without losing the thread. Before, I'd read the first paragraph of an article and forget what it was about by the second. Now, I could read a whole page and retain the information. Another thing that caught my attention was that I began to have more mental clarity in the mornings. Before, it was hard to start the day. My head felt cloudy, like I was in slow motion. But little by little, that feeling disappeared. I got up, had breakfast, ate my blueberries, and it was like a part of my mind that had been turned off started turning back on. Even my daughter noticed. One day, while we talked on the phone, she said, "Dad, you seem more alert lately. What are you doing differently?" And of course, I told her about my new habit. Of course, it wasn't magic. It wasn't like I recovered my memory completely overnight, nor that I was the same as 20 years ago. But there was real improvement. I began remembering little things that used to slip away. The name of a neighbor who always greeted me but whose name I had forgotten for months. My sister's birthday date, without anyone reminding me. Even the recipe for a stew I hadn't cooked in years. One day, while in the kitchen, it just came to mind. It was like my brain was waking up. Every little memory recovered. Every conversation I could follow without getting lost felt like a small victory. And that motivated me even more to continue. Because if in just a few weeks I could already notice those changes, what more could happen if I kept going? And right then, I decided to do something else. Dive deeper into the science behind all this. I wanted to know exactly why this fruit was having that effect on me. But that, I'll tell you in the next part. What science says about this fruit and memory in older adults. After noticing those first improvements, I couldn't help but wonder, is it just coincidence? Or are these little fruits really doing something inside me? So I sat in front of the computer and started researching. I spent hours reading articles, watching doctors' videos, and reviewing studies about the relationship between certain foods and memory in older adults. And what I found surprised me. It turns out that blueberries, those small dark blue fruits, are one of the most studied foods in the world when it comes to brain health. Harvard University, the University of Exeter in England, and even the United States Department of Agriculture have conducted research on the effects of blueberries in older adults. One study that caught my attention was published in 2017 by the University of Exeter. In that study, they took a group of people over 60 years old and gave them a concentrated blueberry supplement for 12 weeks. The result? Participants showed significant improvements in their working memory. That memory we use to remember short-term things, like a recent conversation, or what we were going to do after turning off the TV. But that wasn't all. They also observed that brain activity, measured through magnetic resonance imaging, improved in specific areas related to concentration and memory. Then I understood something very important. This wasn't magic. It was science. And the reason has to do with substances blueberries contain, called anthocyanins and flavonoids. To make it simple, flavonoids are natural compounds that act as antioxidants. And what do antioxidants do? They help protect our cells from damage caused by aging. In the brain's case, these compounds improve blood circulation, reduce inflammation, and promote communication between neurons. That's why eating blueberries regularly can help improve memory, concentration, and even mood. Another study I found, this time from the United States Department of Agriculture, showed that older adults who frequently consume blueberries have a lower rate of cognitive decline compared to those who don't. And I'm not talking about exaggerated amounts. In most of these studies, the quantities were quite accessible. A few tablespoons of blueberries a day, or a small handful at breakfast. And if that weren't enough, I discovered they don't just help memory, but can also reduce the risk of heart disease, and improve blood sugar control. Something very important for people like me, who are already at an age where all that matters. So, after reading all that, I knew it wasn't a coincidence. The improvements I was feeling had an explanation. It wasn't just an internet trend, or one of those tips that come and go. There was real science behind all this, and that motivated me even more to continue with this small habit. But, as you can imagine, it didn't stop there. Because as weeks passed, the changes in my memory and in my daily life became even more noticeable. How I incorporated it permanently into my daily routine. After seeing the first changes, I assure you there was no turning back. I knew this fruit, blueberries, was going to be part of my life every day. But of course, knowing is one thing, doing it is another. So I sat down and asked myself, how can I incorporate blueberries into my routine in a way that is easy, practical, and above all, won't bore me over time? The first thing I did was start with breakfast. Every morning, right after getting up, I prepare a small bowl of oatmeal, natural yogurt, and a handful of fresh blueberries. Sometimes, if I don't have yogurt, I mix them with a little honey and chia seeds. Other times, I simply eat them alone, like a small snack before going for a walk. And when I want to vary, I make a smoothie. I put a glass of plant-based milk, a small banana, a handful of spinach, a tablespoon of oatmeal, and of course, a good handful of blueberries. It tastes delicious and gives me energy for the whole morning. If for some reason I can't get fresh blueberries, I also use frozen ones. I leave them out a few minutes at room temperature, and that's it. The flavor remains excellent, and the benefits the same. As for the amount, after reading several studies, I understood I didn't need to eat large quantities to notice effects. A small handful a day, roughly half a cup, is enough. So, that's exactly what I do. And here I want to be honest with you. It wasn't just the fruit. I also made other small but very important changes. For example, I started walking more every morning before breakfast. I go for a 20 or 30-minute walk around the neighborhood. I breathe fresh air, move my legs, and clear my mind at the same time. I also return to doing crosswords. I'm no expert, but it helps keep my brain active and also entertains me. Another thing I changed was the way I sleep. Before, I went to bed at any hour, watching TV late or staying awake for no reason. Now, I try to go to bed at the same time every night, turn off the TV at least an hour before, and read a little before sleeping. That has helped me rest much better, and we all know good sleep is key for memory. And lastly, something that cost me a lot, but I did it with determination. I reduced sweets and ultra-processed foods. I didn't eliminate them completely, but saved them only for special occasions, because I understood that if I wanted to take care of my memory, I had to take care of my whole body. The combination of these changes, along with my new habit of eating blueberries every day, was what started making a real difference. So, if you're thinking of trying it, my advice is simple. Start little by little. Don't complicate things, and make it part of your daily routine. A small change, repeated every day, can do more for your health than you imagine. And the best part, the journey was just beginning. Because as months passed, the benefits not only lasted, but grew. Long-term results, how my memory is today. Now, after so many months following this routine, I want to tell you how my memory is today. If you had seen me a year ago, you wouldn't recognize me. Before, I forgot things almost daily. I would go to the kitchen, open the fridge, and just stare inside, not remembering what I was going to get. Or I'd meet a neighbor on the street, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't remember their name. There were days when I felt clumsy, like my mind was wrapped in some kind of fog, and that scared me. But now, things are different. Today I can say, with a huge smile, that the fog has lifted. I won't lie. I'm not the same as when I was 40. But neither am I the confused and forgetful man from a few months ago. Today, I remember appointments better. I recall important dates. And when I talk with my grandchildren, I can follow the conversation without losing the thread or repeating the same stories over and over. Recently, one of my daughters came to see me. She looked at me and with a smile said, "Dad, you seem more awake, more present. Before I saw you distracted, but now you're attentive to everything." And those words, I assure you, touched my heart. Because beyond remembering names or appointments, what I value most is feeling connected, feeling part of the conversations, being able to enjoy an afternoon with my family without feeling lost or out of place. Another thing I've noticed is that now I have more confidence in myself. Before, I avoided going out alone, fearing getting lost or not knowing how to get back home. Today, I go for walks around the neighborhood again, greet neighbors, and I find my way much better. I even went back to reading books, something that before was very hard because I forgot what I had read on previous pages. And there's something I want to highlight. These changes didn't happen overnight. They were weeks, months of consistency, taking care of what I eat, moving more, resting better, and keeping my mind alive. And of course, not missing my daily portion of blueberries. Now, every time I prepare my breakfast or make my smoothie, I do it with a small smile, knowing I am taking care of my brain, just like I used to take care of my muscles or heart. My family notices it too. They don't repeat things to me as many times. They tell me their stories, their plans, and ask for my opinion, because they know I am there, attentive, listening, and participating. And you don't know how good it feels to feel you have an active place in the lives of those you love again. Of course, I remain aware that memory, like everything in life, needs constant care. But now, I no longer feel fear every time I forget something. I know it's normal. I know I can improve. And I know, with these small habits, I can keep my mind sharp much longer. If you're also noticing your memory isn't the same, I encourage you to start, little by little, but consistently. Because if at 84 years old, I was able to notice changes, you can too. Before ending this video, I want to speak from the heart. If you're watching this and recognize yourself in my story, if lately you find yourself forgetting keys, names, or even important things like medical appointments, if you're afraid this might get worse, I want to say something very clear. Don't give up. Don't think that just because you're over 70, 80, or even 90 years old, everything is lost. Believe me, I thought that way too at first. I remember those days when I sat alone in the living room with a lost look, wondering if I was starting down that path toward oblivion. That path we fear so much when we hear words like dementia or Alzheimer's. But today, I can tell you sincerely, there are always things we can do. Small changes, daily decisions, habits that little by little give us back control over our mental health. I'm not saying, not for a second, that this fruit I've talked about is a miracle cure. No, it would be irresponsible to promise that. But what I can say, with my hand on my heart, is that for me, it was the start of a change I desperately needed. That small daily action, that portion of blueberries each morning, was like a first step. A simple gesture that gave me hope and pushed me to take care of my mind, my body, and my emotional well-being. Sometimes, we don't have to wait for a doctor to give us all the answers. Sometimes, we can start with what's in our hands, improving what we eat, moving a little more, challenging our minds with a crossword, reading a book, learning something new, and above all, believing we can still improve. So if you're going through a moment like this, if you worry about your memory or someone you love, I encourage you not to stay idle. Start with something small, but start. Take care of yourself, like you would take care of the person you love most. And now, I want to ask you a question, because I would love to read your answers in the comments. Do you often forget things? Do you get stuck in the middle of a conversation? Or do you enter a room and forget what you were going to do? And I'd also love to know, what do you do to take care of your memory? Do you have any tricks, habits, recommendations you want to share with all of us here? Leave them down in the comments, because I'm sure many watching are also looking for ideas, just like I was at one time. If this video has helped you, given you hope, or simply made you feel accompanied, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and to activate the notification bell, because every week I share more stories like this. Real stories, full of advice, science, life experiences, all with one purpose: to help you live this stage of your life with more health, more clarity, and above all, more joy. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for listening to me. And thank you for being part of this community. See you in the next video.